This Wall Street Journal article that just came out is a blockbuster. It says, first of all, it points to something that I have supined that this is RICO, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, eventually. But it says rally funded by top Trump donor, helped by Alex Jones, organizers say. Now, for some particular reason, the Wall Street Journal doesn't want to put the real news in the title. Publix Super Market's Heiress, don't even want to say her name, put in $300,000 to the Ellipse event, and then Alex Jones here put in $50,000, and then it goes on to read the rally in Washington's Ellipse that preceded the January 6th Trump terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol was arranged and funded by a small group including a top Trump campaign fundraiser and donor facilitated by far-right show host Alex Jones. Mr. Jones personally pledged more than $50,000 in seed money for a planned January 6th event in exchange for a guaranteed top speaking slot of his choice, according to a funding document outlining a deal between his company and an early organizer of the event. Mr. Jones also helped arrange for Julie Jenkins Fancelli, a prominent donor to the Trump campaign, and Heiress to the Publix Super Market Incorporated chain, to commit about $300,000 to a top fundraising official for former President Donald Trump's 2020 campaign, according to organizers. Her money paid for the lion's share of the roughly $500,000 rally at the Ellipse where Mr. Trump spoke. Another far-right activist and leader of the, quote, Stop the Steal movement, Ali Alexander, is his name, helped coordinate planning with Carolyn Wren, a fundraising official who was paid by the Trump campaign for much of 2020 and who was tapped by Ms. Fancelli to organize and fund an event on her behalf, organizers said. On social media, Mr. Alexander had targeted January 6th as a key date for supporters to gather in Washington to contest the 2020 election certification results. The week of the rally, he tweeted a flyer for the event saying, quote, D.C. becomes Fort Trump starting tomorrow on my orders. That's Alex Jones. Then, as the caption reads, Alex Jones addressed protesters at the Capitol grounds on January 6th. The Ellipse rally, at which President Trump urged supporters to march to the U.S. Capitol, was lawful and nonviolent, but it served as a jumping-off point for many supporters to head to the Capitol. Mr. Trump had been impeached by the Democrat-led House of Representatives, accused of inciting a mob to storm the Capitol with remarks urging supporters to fight like hell. Few details about the funding and organization of the Ellipse event have previously been revealed. Mr. Jones claimed in a video that he paid for a portion of the event, but didn't offer details. Messrs. Jones and Alexander had been active in the weeks before the event, calling on supporters to oppose the election results and go to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Alexander, for instance, tweeted on December 30th about the scheduled January 6th count for lawmakers to certify the Electoral College vote at the Capitol, writing, if they do this, everyone can guess what me and 500,000 others will do to that building. Hear that? Mr. Alexander, for instance, tweeted on December 30th about the scheduled January 6th count for lawmakers to certify the Electoral College vote at the Capitol, writing, "If they do this, everyone can guess what me and 500,000 others will do to that building." A hodgepodge of different pro-Trump groups were planning various events on January 6th, several of them led by the pro-Trump Women for America First, helped coordinate the Ellipse event. Another group splintered off to lead the rally the night before, at which Mr. Jones ended up speaking. And the group organized by Mr. Alexander planned a protest outside the Capitol building. Mr. Jones, who has publicized discredited conspiracy theories, has hosted leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, two extremist groups prominent at the riot, on his popular radio and internet video shows. This is Julie Jenkins Fancelli, shown in 2019, who donated more than $980,000 in the 2020 election cycle to a joint account for the Trump campaign and the Republican Party, records show. Mr. Jones declined to respond to requests for comment by the Wall Street Journal. In a statement, Mr. Alexander said, "Stop the Steal's motto is peaceful but rowdy," that the violence at the Capitol wasn't planned by his group, and said none of his rhetoric incited violence. Messrs. Alexander and Jones said on Mr. Jones' show that they tried to prevent protesters from entering the Capitol and sought to de-escalate the riot. Neither has been accused of wrongdoing. A spokesman for the Trump campaign said it had no role in financing or organizing the Ellipse event and didn't direct former staffers to do so. A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump declined the comment. At least 5 former Trump campaign staffers, besides Ms. Wren, assisted on the logistics of the January 6th rally, according to the permit and Federal Election Commission records. This is Ali Alexander, who is activist and leader of the Stop the Steal movement. That's Ali Alexander there. He helped coordinate planning of the Ellipse rally. Starting in mid-December, Mr. Alexander began publicizing plans to march and peacefully occupy D.C. with hashtag Stop the Steal, according to organizers, and a message saved by Devin Burkhart, who directs an organization that tracks extremist groups. Mr. Trump, on December 19th, urged supporters through Twitter to come for January 6 protests that he said would be wild. Mr. Alexander created a website called wildprotest.com, writing, "We the people must take to the U.S. Capitol lawn and steps and tell Congress do not certify on January 6th. He planned and publicized a rally to take place in the Capitol grounds that day. The website was taken offline after the riot." A representative of Women for America First had applied for a permit to host a separate rally just after the inauguration on January, but the group rescheduled for January 6th after the December 19th Trump tweet, organizers said. Women for America First's permit for the Ellipse rally listed several names and positions, including Ms. Wren as VIP coordinator in the 2020 election cycle, the Trump campaign, and a joint GOP committee paid Ms. Wren and her fundraising consulting firm $730,000, according to FEC records. It's a Save America March. Ms. Wren had been tapped to handle funding by Ms. Fancelli, the major donor to the Ellipse event, according to organizers. Ms. Fancelli, who didn't respond to several requests for comment, donated more than $980,000 in the 2020 election cycle to a joint account for the Trump campaign and Republican Party record show. Ms. Fancelli, daughter of the Publix Super Market founder, contacted Mr. Jones and offered to contribute to a January 6th event, organizers said. Ms. Jones connected her to an organizer through Ms. Wren, who handled the funding as she helped coordinate the logistics of a rally with Women for America First. A public spokeswoman said Ms. Fancelli isn't involved in the company's business operations and doesn't, quote, represent the company in any way. Well, the Ellipse setup costs roughly $500,000 with a concert stage, a $100,000 grass covering, and thousands of feet of security structures. Ms. Wren played a central role in bringing together disparate groups of activists, planning events on January 6th. She suggested to Mr. Alexander that he reschedule his Capitol rally to 1 p.m. and put into place a list of about 30 potential speakers, including Messrs. Alexander and Jones, who had been listed on websites as associated with the day's events and according to organizers. Let me repeat the following part. Ms. Fancelli, daughter of the Publix Super Market founder, contacted Mr. Jones and offered to contribute to a January 6th event, organizers said. Mr. Jones connected her to an organizer through Ms. Wren, who handled the funding as she helped coordinate the logistics of a rally with Women for America First. That was the rally that was to occur on Inauguration Day. That was moved to January 6th. A public spokeswoman said Ms. Fancelli isn't involved in the company's business operations and doesn't represent the company in any way. The Ellipse setup cost roughly $500,000 with a concert stage, a $100,000 grass covering, and thousands of feet of security structures. Ms. Wren played a central role in bringing together the disparate groups of activists planning events on January 6th. She suggested to Mr. Alexander that he reschedule his Capitol rally to 1 p.m. and put into place a list of about 30 potential speakers, including Messrs. Alexander and Jones, who had been listed on websites associated with the day's events, according to organizers. In a statement, Ms. Wren said her role for the event was, quote, to assist many others in providing and arranging for a professionally produced event at the Ellipse. The involvement of Messrs. Jones and Alexander triggered debate among the organizers. Amy Krimmer, chairwoman of Women for America First, said in a statement, "We were concerned because there was an aggressive push to have fringe participation in our event." And I might add that Women for America First is actually a Georgia organization. I checked. In text messages, Ms. Wren sent to another organizer and reviewed by the Journal, Ms. Wren defended Mr. Jones. Quote, I promise he's actually way nicer than he comes off. I'm hoping you become besties, Ms. Wren wrote. Ms. Wren's spokesman said the message is, quote, evidence of Ms. Wren assisting in executing an event while having to diplomatically get people with different agendas on the same page. None of the groups obtained a march permit, though Women for America First called the event March to Save America rally, and Mr. Alexander's Stop the Steal promoted a march to the Capitol online. The Women for America First Ellipse permit said the group wouldn't conduct a march, but noted some participants may leave to attend rallies at the United States Capitol to hear the results of congressional certification of the Electoral College count. Kylie Creamer, co-founder of Women for America First, said the group didn't file for a march permit because it went against COVID-19 guidelines and a march wasn't in its plans. When Mr. Trump met on January 4th with former campaign advisor Katrina Pearson, who had begun working with rally organizers, he said he wanted to be joined primarily by lawmakers assisting his efforts to block electoral votes from being counted and members of his own family, aides said. Messrs. Alexander and Jones spoke instead at a January 5th rally organized by the 80% Coalition, a group founded by Cindy Chiffian, an early organizer of the January 6th event, who struck the initial deal with Mr. Jones. She said she was willing to work with Mr. Jones because, quote, it is unreasonable to expect to agree with everything a group or person does. Mr. Jones' seed money, in the end, was used for that January 5th rally, for which he ultimately paid about $96,000, an organizer said. In his speech at that event, Mr. Jones said, quote, I don't know how all this is going to end, but if they want to fight, they'd better believe they've got one. The next day, Ms. Wren personally escorted Mr. Jones and Mr. Alexander off the Ellipse grounds before the two men marched to the U.S. Capitol, according to organizers. She had provided them and many other VIP passes that morning for Mr. Trump's speech. Mrs. Alexander and Jones, Ali Alexander and Alex Jones, were out at the Capitol grounds together on January 6th, and Mr. Jones supported protesters with a bullhorn, video shows. He urged them to be peaceful and proceed to the area on the Capitol grounds where Mr. Alexander had secured a demonstration permit, according to Mr. Alexander and the footage. So there it is. So that's by Shali Ramachandran of the Wall Street Journal, Alexandra Berzon, and Rebecca Ballhaus of the Wall Street Journal. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. And that ends this vlog. That's Ali Alexander. I do not know who that is. That is Ali Alexander, as the caption reads. This is by Reuters, that photograph. And again, this is Julie Jenkins Fancelli, Heiress of the family that founded Publix Super Markets. And there's Alex Jones with the aforementioned bullhorn. And that's the rally, and attendees headed down to the Capitol for their ill-fated eventual Trump terrorist activity.